Okay, so here we are at the fantastic Victoria Falls River Lodge, and right over there is where a crocodile's been sunning itself all day long, and I'm kind of nervous about where the crocodile went. And then along there were some pumbas, warthogs, grazing, and I see they've skedaddled. So anyway, that's the story. And then there's the big baboon tree, and there was leopard spoor behind us, and then there's my outside bath and shower, and of course the mandatory cold plunge, because what would an influencer be if you weren't cold plunging? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about hip function and going from external rotation to internal rotation on your hips, and how important it is and how to do it, and some obstacles that you might find when trying to sort of restore your proper hip function. Okay, so it's really, really important. So it's really important for Achilles injuries too. Okay, so it kind of works like this. In gait, your hips are patterned with flexion and external rotation. So almost like that kind of pattern. And then extension and internal rotation. It's really helpful to think that your hips change gears when you run. Okay, so you land, you travel over, but you land in external rotation, okay, and flexion. So knee in front of hip, external rotation. And then the pattern changes and goes to internal rotation and extension. So we have this duality: external rotation and flexion, internal rotation and extension. And so many running injuries come from your hips are stuck or locked or braced, and they can't transition between that pattern. So let's say, just remember, a lot of rehab is knee in front of hip. So if you're doing single leg work, knee in front of hip. If you're doing clam kind of exercises, monster walking, band walking, knee in front of hip, knee in front of hip, all external rotation. But when you run, you land with your knee and foot probably a little bit in front of your hip, okay? And then you load, and then you're driving out into internal rotation. And it's that driving out into internal rotation, or the seamless transition from external rotation and flexion into internal rotation extension that you need. And that's the job of your hip rotators, or your glute medius and your glute minimus. Glute medius is a fan-shaped muscle. It has a front and a back, and the two don't work the same. You know what I mean? Like when the fibers in the front contract, it's one thing, and then it's almost like it's an articulate muscle, right? So you have to have that proper function for hip health, for femoral neck stress fractures, for Achilles and soleus tears, and I'll explain why now, and for low back pain and running. It's endemic that if you sort this out, generally speaking, most people find an increase in their running ability and capacity, an increase in their efficiency, the brakes open up and you run faster. So it's really, really important to get done. Okay. And the other thing is that your hips dictate how your foot interacts on the ground. So it's not your foot's job to control your hip, it's your hip's job to control how the foot goes down on the ground. Okay, so a little test that you can do, if you've done ballet, okay, or dance, or a lot of forefoot kind of work, a lot of high heels, if you're a forefoot runner, sprint running, okay, if you're very anterior chain based, what you'll find is you can often get stuck in that forward flexion and external rotation pattern, and you can't transition into internal rotation easily. And so there's a very, very simple test for this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lift my heels up. So I'm on my forefoot, okay, not on my toes, just on my forefoot. And I'm going to step forward. But I have to step forward and go towards my lead leg. Okay, so from here, here's a flashlight pointing. My connected torso is going to turn towards my lead leg. So I'm going to go up on my forefoot, heels are hovering off the ground, and see what it feels like to turn onto that lead leg. And then a simple step back, and see how easy it is to sort of transition into this pattern. So we're going to see that pattern to this pattern, which is healthy hip movement. Possibly exaggerated, but that's a healthy hip movement. And see how hard or easy that feels. I'm going to warn you at this stage, if you're a habitual forefoot runner, you're so programmed to it, you might feel that, oh, that feels very familiar and easy, but just try and get a sense of what the hip feels like, what the tension in your hip feels like, and how easy it is to transition through that pattern, and if you can even do it at all. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to stomp. So stomp through your heels, marching on the spot, shake out the tension out of your legs. Okay. Put 60% of your weight through your heels, and then do the same exercise with more weight going through my heels. And generally speaking, most of you should notice that your hips feel a whole lot more secure. Your glute tone improves, like your glute max, you actually have a dimple in your butt, and it feels like you've taken tension out of your hips. So remember, with hips, it's okay to strengthen them, it's very important to strengthen them, but you don't want a sense of held hips or tight hips or blocked hips or braced hips. Your hips are very, very dynamic. So my two hip bones, my ilium, probably do a figure of 8 when you run. We're not sure. A posterior figure of 8, not even an anterior figure of 8. Certainly as you walk, they first tilt backwards and then go forwards. So there is this element to your ilium. Your sacrum is counter-nutating in between the two, and your femurs are going down, back, and internally rotating as you run. So your femurs going from here, okay, externally rotate the femur, this bone, externally rotated, it translates down towards the ground, it extends and it internally rotates, and that gives you this high hip. And the most important thing in running for efficiency and injury prevention is that transition. So you can just practice doing a lot of these. You can practice backward walking, you can strengthen your hips with a tire walking, but that's your goal. You have to defend it, you have to protect it, you have to awesomize that, and you have to be able to transition from that. And just please recognize that 99% of all your hip strengthening exercises are probably done with your knee in front of your hip. Okay. Another great cause for the awesomizers as well, you know, when I'm doing the awesomizer, and there is a video for the awesomizer, and now I'm not going to post the link because I don't know how to. So if I turn and step, I can mobilize my hip in internal rotation and extension, and open up and mobilize my hip and get very, very comfortable in this pattern. So that's a great exercise or way to sort of open up this hip and practice that pattern. And also if we're doing aqua jogging, you can kind of practice that in water. And like I said, backwards walking, tire walking, all promote that transition. And you can just practice what we stood. We used to call it the only drill, because it's the only drill you need to know to run well. Okay, it's just turn, step, fall, heel on the ground, turn. Okay, so I hope that helps clear up hips, hip function, what I think is really, really important in hip function. And because of the shape of your foot and because of the vector of your sole, it's really, really important for Achilles injuries, for midfoot injuries, for everything, all your injuries. It's like the core movement pattern that if it's healthy, things tend to fall into place. Okay, take care, much love, and I hope you also one day have the most blessed experience that we're having right here on safari in Africa.